Hello, I'm Paul Perello, and welcome to the Philly Factor. On April 8th at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, church bells across the greater Philadelphia area pealed, marking the 200th anniversary of the Diocese of Philadelphia. It was on April 8th in 1808 that Pope Pius VII established the Diocese of Philadelphia. The Archdiocese of Philadelphia capped the year-long celebration with the bell-ringing ceremony, prayer, singing, happy birthday, of course, and what birthday celebration would not be complete without birthday cake on the steps of the Cathedral Basilica of Saints Peter and Paul. To help coordinate a celebration 200 years in the making is no easy task, but much of the credit goes to the men and women, children, clergy, students, and lay faithful of the Archdiocese of Philadelphia in completing the anniversary and ensuring the continuation of the mission of the Archdiocese of Philadelphia in the years and hopefully centuries to follow. Shepherding the Bicentennial effort in the Archdiocese of Philadelphia is Father Joseph McClune, chair of the Bicentennial and pastor of St. Catherine Drexel Parish in Chester. Father, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Well, it's been a busy year for you and your staff.
Yes.
And of course, capped with this great celebration back on April 8th. Let's talk a little bit about how we got to this 200th celebration, the Bicentennial of the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. It was back Pius VII decided that there would be a diocese known as Philadelphia. But I guess we should, sort of set the record straight that the Catholic Church was in existence in the United States well before 1808.
Would have its roots. There would be Catholic masses celebrated in America as early as the 1640s. So I think in a little island around Washington would be one of the places in Maryland. And then even here in Philadelphia, obviously, Mass would have been celebrated at Old St. Joseph's, and Old St. Mary's would have existed at the time. And there would have been mission chapels and circuit rider priests, riding from place to place to minister to the small but very separated Catholic community.
So when the decision is made in Rome then by the Pope to sort of establish the Diocese of Philadelphia, what was so significant in that decision?
I think what happened was Baltimore was the original diocese, okay? And then the original Bishop John Carroll of Baltimore, who of course would have been from the very famous Carrolls of Carrollton, whose brother would have signed the Declaration of Independence, he would have been telling Rome right away, it's too big. I mean, he would have been the bishop of the original 13 colonies, that whole area. And so he asked the Pope at the time to separate out and make smaller dioceses so that those people could have better care, pastoral care. So here, obviously, Philadelphia was the large metropolitan city at the time, and there was an established Catholic presence and community. So we were, on that same day, the Diocese of Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and Bardstown, Kentucky, which has now been transferred to Louisville. They were all established as suffragan sees to the larger diocese, which then Baltimore would have become an archdiocese, and they would have had these 4 dioceses. So we all share the same birthday.
I think many people, especially here in Philadelphia, can understand Baltimore, New York, Philadelphia, but Kentucky? I mean, sort of, how did that fit into the whole equation?
Well, I think what happened were that some of these early immigrants, Catholic immigrants, were going west for the work, and actually at the time, historically, they probably had more of a reason for a diocese there in Bardstown than Boston did at the time. But they were looking up that way and thinking, well, it's going to grow.
Sure.
But at the time, there was very few Catholics, where a Catholic presence in Boston, which of course is now very Catholic, but at the time, in that area around Bardstown, Kentucky, in Louisville, they would call that God's Holy Land. There was really a very strong Catholic presence there at the time.
So once the Pope establishes the Diocese of Philadelphia, he needs to put a bishop in charge of the diocese?
He does. And now in today's modern world, where everyone would know that day that something had happened, in 1808, it would take the document to come from Rome, and by the time the document would come from Rome and the person, the first bishop, Bishop Egan, would come from Ireland, it would not really all get together until 1811. It would take 3 years to finally get him here to Philadelphia and get him ordained a bishop and actually have its first resident bishop in the city.
How many original parishes then, or how many, what was the geographic area? Now we talk about the 5-county Archdiocese of Philadelphia, but give us an idea of the geography of the early diocese.
The early diocese was established as the whole state of Pennsylvania, half of New Jersey from Trenton on down, in the whole state of Delaware.
So it's pretty big.
It was very large, and at the time, I'm guessing the numbers, I'm not the historian, just 10 priests for the whole area. Unbelievable.
Yeah, and they talk about priest shortage
I
today.
know,
You know, you look
yes.
at, traditionally or
Yes.
historically.
Right, and actually when the bishop would go off to confirm, say, he'd be gone for months on time because it would involve tugboats and boats and trains and horseback and just a whole big circuit it would take him to sort of set out to try to see his flock.
Sure. We're talking about the bicentennial of the Diocese of Philadelphia. So at what year then does the Diocese of Philadelphia become an archdiocese?
Somewhere around the 1870s, I think it would be, that then other dioceses would have broken off. Erie, Scranton, and little by little. And so then they would say, okay, well then they become suffragancies, they're called.
Sure.
And then the Diocese of Philadelphia is raised to being an archdiocese with, other sees that sort of somewhat report back into it.
Did much of that decision also have to do with the fact that the population in
Absolutely.
Philadelphia was starting
growing,
to expand? Yeah.
growing greatly. So then it was obvious then that we should get, the smaller diocese becomes the large diocese,
Sure.
and then the large diocese becomes the archdiocese.
We talked at the beginning of the program about this bell ringing ceremony on April 8th, 2008, that sort of marked the significant date on the birthday of the Archdiocese. But that was just one event of what has been a very action-packed year for the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, sort of celebrating this faithful, rich tradition of all the faithful, of all walks of life, whether it's South Philly or Northeast Philadelphia, whether it's out in Chester County or up in Doylestown, really celebrating all the contributions of the Roman Catholic Church in the greater Philadelphia area.
It is, and the theme for the bicentennial was serving the people of God in the beginning, now, and always. So sort of like as you said earlier, that the church was here and present even before the actual establishment of the diocese, because the church is the people of God. So those early Catholics who hungered, for Mass and the sacraments when the priest came by on horseback. And so as much as the theme has been serving the people of God in the beginning, now, and always, there's that connotation or really a commitment to say, well, we're not only looking back and celebrating the past, but we, the church today, are called to recommit ourselves to serving the people of God in the many different ways that the church, in all of its different people, sacraments, institutions, people, religious, priests, sisters, lay people, how do we all, each and every person, how do we serve God's people?
When the Cardinal Cardinal Justin Regali decided to have this big celebration, does he get you on the phone, Father, and say, I'm planning this party for the bicentennial of the Archdiocese of Philadelphia? I mean, a lot of preparation really had to go into this.
2 years, sure. 2.5 years, basically, by the time the whole thing was over.
Yeah.
Yes, but when he talked to me and the other auxiliary bishops talked to me, they said, Joe, we just don't want to look back. We really do look forward. And he said, we don't want to add too many things. Like, we had a few big events, but we want to take what we're already doing and try to bring some renewed emphasis to it, like on a diocesan level.
Sure.
And then even on a parish level. So one of the events that we did, which I thought was great success, we had a season of service from the Feast of St. John Newman to the Feast of St. Catherine Drexel. And we basically asked every parish, school, and institution to say, well, how are you serving God's people? And the Cardinal was adamant that we weren't just going to say, do something new, because he knew that parishes and schools and colleges and universities were already doing great things. But how could you look at that and say, well, maybe we could do what we're already doing a little better, and maybe we could reach out to this group of people or to these people in this way. We can serve God's people in a new way. Maybe it's time for us to shake it up a little bit.
What has been the reaction of the faithful to the whole celebration? Because, I mean, I'm sure you saw it at every level, be it the parish level and be it on the grand scale, the bigger level. So what has been the reaction of this year-long celebration of the bicentennial?
Well, I wondered as we went along. I would say it was a kind of a thing where it grew. I guess you could say it snowballed a little bit, and people thought it was nice and interesting, you know. So two things. I think by the whole end of the year, I hope that every single Catholic realized that they're part of this larger universal church, you know, that it's not just my parish, but it's a parish who's a part of a church who's part of a larger national church, universal church. And at the same time, we wanted the whole Delaware Valley to see the contributions of the Catholic Church, even if you're not Catholic, to look and to see and to say, well, look what the Catholic Church is doing. You know, so oftentimes, you know, the news of the church is negative when there's a mistake made or there's scandal or something like that, but to try to focus on the good, everyday Catholics and what they're doing and how they're trying to live out their faith. So I found that as being very, not a challenge, because it was just so easy, because so many people are doing so much in the name of Jesus Christ in the Catholic Church.
I also want to mention here this great book that we have here on the table in front of us, which sort of documents the history of the Archdiocese, but not just the Archdiocese. And times we think of the, if you'll pardon the expression, the bureaucracy of the Archdiocese, but it really documents all of the parishes in the Archdiocese, whether that parish is 100 years old or maybe a new parish like your parish in Chester, which sort of has been molded into a new parish from existing parishes.
Right. So Father Philip Bochansky was the general editor, and a lot of different people helped him to write the book. But I do think that's significant. There's a lot of pictures in the book. There's a lot of color in the book, because that's what makes up the church, the diversity of the church, young and old, you know, so the very oldest parishes to the very youngest parish. So it's not just the history, but in the back, just to focus on all those parishes so that everybody sees they're part of that larger church, the work of the church and the church going forward from today. So, I mean, there's a pride to it.
Sure.
There's a pride to the history of the church, and there's a pride to the fact that these parishes and these people are all part of the church.
Yeah, and we like to mention here that the book is being made available a number of different ways. You can actually purchase the book. Many parishes have copies of the book that you could purchase right from your parish, or you could actually go to the Archdiocesan website, which is archphila.org, and you can actually purchase the
There's an
the
order
book
form there right on the website.
And of course, the name of the book is Our Faith-Filled Heritage, and you could go to the website and you can find out more information about purchasing the book. And it is a book that really documents the rich history, faith-filled history of the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. You mentioned two names that I have to go back to, because one is the name of the parish that you are currently pastor of, Catherine Drexel, which sort of is a name synonymous with Philadelphia. The Drexel name, obviously synonymous with the city of Philadelphia, but and then John Newman, two saints of the Catholic Church that walked the streets of Philadelphia. And in Catherine Drexel's case, not that long ago. John Newman's case, much longer ago. But these are names that have sort of evoke just tremendous passion and faith-filled lives that sort of serve as an inspiration to many Catholics and maybe even non-Catholics in the greater Philadelphia area and around the world.
Right. Well, I think both of them help tell the story of the Catholic Church. John Newman, small, very an immigrant person himself from Bavaria, comes over here to America, and when he gets named the Bishop of Philadelphia, he thinks, what can I do? He's met with a church which is very poor, and all these immigrants are very uneducated, and they're teeming into America, and how does he reach out to them? And he had to find priests that could speak all these different languages. He'd establish all kinds of parishes for them. Like, he had to meet their need right where they needed to be met.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so oftentimes, especially back then, the history of the church was filled with social services, orphanages and homes and things like that, and just the welfare of these poor immigrant people. And he did it so beautifully. And then Catherine Drexel the same way. Here, this rich Philadelphia socialite.
Sure.
And living here in this country, an American, not an immigrant, but an American, but looks around and sees, maybe we've established ourselves, and we had all these national and territorial parishes and masses in all these languages, and all these immigrant people are now passing on the faith, and the next generation is doing better than the generation before. But Catherine Drexel's looking at these people, African American people especially, and Native American people, and saying, who's reaching out to them? What's the church doing to help them? What's the government doing to do them? help them. And so I always say, especially since I'm the pastor of that parish, I love to tell the story of this woman of faith, you know, at a time when women didn't have the right to vote.
Sure.
You know, here she was, a pioneer of social justice, you know, and really concerned that they get education, that they be treated fairly and equally, and that they themselves know that they were created in the image and likeness of God.
And their stories are so relevant to today's history, because even though in Catherine Drexel's case she didn't live that long ago, and in John Newman's case much longer ago, much of what they were about can still be applied to
Today.
our everyday circumstances.
Absolutely, especially today with the immigration issue.
Sure.
You know, my own mother and father are from Ireland and are immigrants, and you know, I would sometimes laugh at my father when I was growing up. He'd say, "Oh, they're letting too many foreigners in," and I would think to myself, "But Dad, you're a foreigner."
Sure.
And so we as Americans so oftentimes can be so short-sighted.
Right.
And I think the church obviously today is trying to say, let's couch this argument in a respect for everybody, that we're all God's people, and that America is a land that has always historically welcomed people to its shores.
Not necessarily part of the Bicentennial of the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, but very much a historic visit just recently was the visit of Pope Benedict XVI to the United States. At the age of 81, there was no sign that he was slowing down at all while he was here for a very action-packed week. You had the opportunity to can celebrate Mass with the Pope up at Yankee Stadium in New York.
I did.
What was that like?
It was very nice. And actually that Mass, one of the two reasons why the Pope, you know, came to America, or they asked him to come and everyone put their invitation in, and because he is 81, I think they very wisely said, you know, and so he did say, I'm coming to all of America and to speak to all Catholics. But he went to Washington, obviously the seat of our government, and then he came to New York for the United Nations. But the Mass in Yankee Stadium was a Mass to honor and to celebrate the bicentennials of the raising up of Baltimore as an archdiocese and the 4 other dioceses, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and now Louisville. And so they were prominently, our coat of arms were, you know, prominently displayed there. And because of that, 20 priests from each one of those dioceses got to celebrate. I happened to be one because of my role, I guess, as the chairman. And we were led out first onto the field in Yankee Stadium, and 60,000 people there. And luckily, we had 3,000 people from the Archdiocese of Philadelphia who, when they recognized us with our vestments on, all stood up and waved. And, you know, and then it was even more glorious when the Pope arrived on the field. And luckily for us, where we were seated, the priest from Philadelphia, he was right there on the ramp on the way up to the altar, and the Pope had to walk. You're sitting further from me right now than the Pope had to walk by us. So it was just a beautiful, glorious day, and just a true celebration. And he challenged us in the homily, like, you know, just like here, Cardinal Regali said, we're not just looking back, but we're being challenged to live out our faith in a whole spirit of hope. You know, if we look back and see all that we've accomplished with God's grace, why wouldn't we be hope-filled that although we have many challenges, we have some work to do, yes, but with God's grace and with people working together, you know, the church can continue to grow into the future.
How does the Pope's visit here to the United States, I guess, affect you as a priest? Because, you know, it's we, the Catholic faithful, see the leader of our church, and whether we're watching it on television or we're seeing bits of it on the evening news or listening to it on the radio, it's one thing. I remember still 1979 when Pope John Paul II went up Broad Street, and me with my Super 8 camera, the only glimpse that I got of him was through the viewfinder of the Super 8 camera. But it's a memory that, you know, you sort of, I still get goosebumps talking about it. But so I know what that means to me and my faith, but for you that are, you know, our spiritual leaders, for the priest and the other religious in the diocese, and not only the Philadelphia Archdiocese, but across the country, what does it mean for you to sort of, you know, walk in the shadow of the Pope at Yankee Stadium and celebrate Mass and hear him talk? What does that do for you?
Well, it's a shot in the arm, obviously. It makes you feel good and proud of who you are and you know, what you're trying to do. You know, but I mean, I think the Pope, in our understanding, and I think this came through so well with the death of Pope John Paul II, at the end of the day, he's just like the rest of us, a faithful Christian, hopefully, a disciple. And so I think for me, you know, as a priest, it does two things. It makes me try to commit myself to be a better priest. And at the same time, it's an opportunity for me as a priest to highlight all the other people in the church who are trying to live their faith in so many different ways, you know. And I think the visit of the Holy Father just gives us all that renewed energy and sense of optimism and hope. And I think the media coverage was great, you know. It's very easy to look at bad things, but something like this, he just came, and I think he was portrayed well as just a holy, simple, humble man who's trying to do his best to preach and to teach Jesus Christ. He doesn't want it to be about himself.
Sure.
He wants it to be about the Lord.
In that stadium at Yankee Stadium at that Mass, I got the feeling and the impression, and of course I'm sitting, you know, miles away from Yankee Stadium at home watching this on television, but got the impression that he understood the rich history of the diocese in particular, but of the Catholic in America. You know, oftentimes, you know, not necessarily the Pope, but all leaders at such a level tend to only see things in a particular way or their way and don't really understand or appreciate, I guess, what's going on in the trenches, if you will. But I got the impression that he was very cognizant and very aware of the needs of all Americans and with our place in the world, if you will.
I think so. I mean, 200 years for him, maybe coming from the church in Germany or living in Rome with thousands of years of history, you know, he's probably thinking, in one sense you could say, what's that, you know? But in another sense, that's what he's looking at. And he's saying, look what has happened in this great nation of immigrant, diverse people. Look what has happened, not only in America, but look what the church has contributed to the building up of society as a whole. And who could deny the fact that I do think he, as you said, has a great understanding and respect for the role of America in the world and the role of the American church as part of that universal church, because we are a very generous church in America, you know, to his needs and to the needs of the world. And we're very much, you know, but in such a short amount of time.
Sure.
You know, I mean, here we are sitting in Philadelphia, but, you know, 200 years ago, what was Philadelphia like? I mean, it's just amazing what has been accomplished. And so oftentimes, and I think it was said to the Pope, so oftentimes someplace like in St. Patrick's Cathedral, you know, built on pennies and nickels of poor immigrant people who wanted to express their faith. And the same story could be told. I was at the cathedral here, stationed in our cathedral in Philadelphia, and the story could be told there that the building was built at a time when the Know Nothing riots and anti-Catholic hostility, and these people, you know, was on the fringe of the city, you know, no windows in the cathedral because they would have been broken.
Sure.
But these people were not going to, their God was so important to them, they were going to build the biggest and the best and the most beautiful structure in the whole city because of their pride of who they were and how they saw their God in their life.
Again, we're talking about the bicentennial of the Diocese of Philadelphia, of course, as we refer to it today, the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, all documented in this book. And the other thing that I want to mention is that you can go to the Archdiocesan website, and you do have video clips that are available there, which, you know, it's encouraging that the, you know, even the church now has their own website and they're streaming video, if you will. You know, it is a modern day, it is a modern age, and you can see many of the events that transpired over the past year. So if you were not able to make the happy birthday cake ceremony on the steps of the cathedral, you could go to the website and see that.
Yes, you can. There's a little thing that says bell ringers, the bell ringing ceremony, and you can also see the clip, obviously, is the video that we prepared that was shown in National Stadium in Washington for our Holy Father there. And it tells a little bit of the history of the diocese too. So I mean, yes, we try to keep up. It's not always easy, but I think the church is doing a much better job. And as you might know, the Cardinal a few years ago was on YouTube last Lent all the time. You know, used to get a lot of hits and everything like that. He had a weekly Lenten message, and it went all around the world that the Cardinal was that media friendly and trying to reach the faithful in a new way.
Sure.
You know?
I'm guessing for the tricentennial of the Archdiocese, chances are you and I will not be here talking about that, but I'm sure that'll be documented in the book that comes out for the tricentennial.
I hope so. I hope so, yes.
In the few minutes that we have left, Father, I guess lessons learned, if you will, and you look back at the rich history of the 200 years of the diocese and where the church goes from this point forward. because there's tremendous growth out there, tremendous need for priests and lay people to get involved in the church. So as you sort of sit back now at the end of this bicentennial year, where do you see the Archdiocese going?
Well, in one sense, just the way you phrased that question, like I sometimes wonder if, we've almost, our success hurts us in a sense. You know what I mean? We've become complacent, with our faith. When people's faith was tried by not being able to practice their faith, or there was hostility, or they really wanted to build their own church, they got together and they did it. And now maybe it's something we take for granted, our Catholic education, our Catholic faith. And so when I look back, I only wish more people would have a better understanding of the great legacy that has been given to us, and how important it is for us to safeguard it and to hand it on to the next generation, not to take for granted what happened, and then, as you said, like to get more people involved in the living out of their faith and passing on of the faith, and to see that they're part of this great history, but they're really part of the church going forward into the next generation. Well, this has been a fascinating half hour here on our program, and just when you think you thought you knew it all about the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, comes a program like this, comes a celebration like this, and a book that sort of works in tandem, and we really encourage people to pick up a copy of the book. Again, you can go through the Archdiocesan website, or even check with your pastors, because chances are that they have copies of the book at your parishes, and it's a great resource. It's a great story, and 200 years in the making. It's something that all Catholics and all people in the greater Philadelphia area could really celebrate. We talk about our history as a nation born here in Philadelphia, for many, many families and many traditions born right here in the greater Philadelphia area, how that faith process born here in the great city of Philadelphia through the wonderful work of the diocese and now the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. Father, I thank you for your time. I know you're busy, and we're going to get you back to doing your pastoral work at your parish. So do they give you time off now as chairman, or no? They don't really, no. But I'll be happy just to be the pastor in the beautiful city of Chester.
All right. We thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you. Until the next time, and thank you so much for being with us here on the Philly Factor. I'm Paul Perello. Have a great day. Hello, I'm Paul Perello, and welcome to the Philly Factor. You've probably heard of the organization Catholic Relief Services, but do you really know what the group is all about? Catholic Relief Services is the official international humanitarian agency of the U.S. Catholic community. The group is dedicated to alleviating suffering and providing assistance to people in need in more than 100 countries without regard to race, religion, or nationality. Joining us from Catholic Relief Services is Candace Harris. She joined